Dr. Rodrigo Marquez. Since 1995, he has worked as an expert for the United Nations Development Program. He has been a member of the team in charge of the National Human Development Report for Chile. In his position, he co-authored 7 national reports. In December 2016, at the UN headquarters in New York City, the Chilean report received for the 3rd time a global award for the excellency in human development reporting. Dr. Marquez completed his undergraduate studies at Universidad de Chile, obtaining a degree in sociology in 1994. In 2000, he attended summer school at Oxford University. His graduate studies were completed at Leiden University in the Netherlands, where he obtained a doctoral degree in sociology in 2010. He has been a visiting scholar at different graduate and postgraduate programs in Chile and abroad, and since 2003, he has been the chair and professor of the Sociology of Development at the School of Sociology at Universidad de Valparaíso in Chile. So he was the first director of the Sociological Investigation Center at the same university. Please welcome Dr. Marquez to the podium, who will address us by speaking about happiness as a goal of development. Please, Dr. Marquez.
Good morning. It's really my honor and my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, an invitation that came to me 1 year in advance. Very surprised for that, and very grateful for that also. I'm going to tell you a story regarding my background. My background precisely as an expert of human development at the UN. And I start saying that because we at the UN try to deal with this kind of things, not just as an opportunity to understand society, just also as a challenge to change society. So we have to think about how to put in practice these kind of perspectives, happiness or other, in order to try to change society, of course, in a good way, if this can be possible. So what I'm telling to you have to do with this story, with a lot of people being part of that story. It's not my lonely work, it's a work of a team, and it's filled with a lot of experiences. But before going deep into the theme, I think it's important to understand why are we talking about this? Why are we discussing in the realm of the development sphere about happiness? It's been a long journey for this kind of debates. You can see some milestones of that debate, not all the milestones of that debate. Just put 1 to 4 indicators of how the global conversation about development has been going on in the last decades. Of course, there's a selection with some intention. First of all, in 1990, UNDP, Human Development Program, the United Nations Development Program, published their first Human Development Report with the intention to try to change the global conversation from a conversation about economics only to a conversation about people. The simple intention is to put people in the center of development issues. And that's, I think, a very important change, very simple but very profound in a very important and political sense. 2000, we have the Millennium Development Goals. Well, the world set some objectives regarding the reduction of poverty, gender equality, among others. 2011, there's an important milestone for a specific conversation, the adoption by the General Assembly of a declaration because of an initiative of the government of Bhutan, of a declaration that says, regarding development, we have to put attention on happiness and well-being. It's an invitation to the countries to put attention to that dimension of development. In 2015, you may know, the United Nations and near 190 countries signed up a declaration about sustainable development goals, the so-called Agenda 2030, where they set up very important goals in different areas about how to make a world more sustainable, how to obtain more progress, but in a more sustainable way. It's interesting, but in this agenda, there's not the word happiness in 2030 agenda. The word well-being is inside the agenda, but just related to health issues, to mental health issues, actually. So my point is, those are the scenario. What is behind those kind of efforts? I see something in common behind those kind of efforts. That although as a world we have some progress, it's very important to understand that in the long run, the world has been coming to progress in different indicators, but along with progress, we have also increasingly, as a person who used to say, a world that is more unequal, more unsustainable, more unstable. Another on you want to add? I think more untrusted. And let me leave that word here, untrusted. So something's not working. Okay, we have a lot of progress. It's very important to put progress on the table also. But something is not working if we also have this kind of world. We have to change the way we think about the development, the way we take our decisions about development. That way, I said, we need a new narrative about the future. And the word narrative, for me, is very important because development, in some sense, is kind of a narrative. It's kind of a proposal to people about create a future, an image about the future. It's a promise. It's something very important to take into consideration. It's about to have an image about a desirable future and also have a strategy how to build this future I am proposing you. But as a narrative, as a promise, it depends on that people believe what you are telling is a good and desirable image of the future. It needs to be credible, it needs to be trusted, it needs to be affordable, but it needs to be accountable. So that's why those efforts, let me go backwards, goes in that direction. How to put in the global conversation a new narrative that can be credible, affordable, feasible, and can capture the imagination of people. Of course, not all the people more engaged in this kind of conversation, but the imagination of leaders and in every field of society in order to follow that image and try to build it. 2030 agenda have this, I think, opportunity because they have received a lot of political support and many efforts of the entire United Nations system and public and private actors are organizing around the Agenda 2030. So there is a very interesting opportunity. But again, Is happiness a word that we can use to create that image of future? It's happiness something that should be inside our strategies? Again, Agenda 2030 says nothing about happiness. There are coming some new efforts to try to make the connections. I have the opportunity to be at Dubai in February, where they invite us, a group of intellectuals, a group of professionals, to try to make the connection between happiness and 2030 agenda. Because the big question, I think, is still unanswered. What is the ultimate aim of development? What is the most important goal a society should reach? And I think this is the most important question. I think it's not completely answered. I will come back to this question at the end of my presentation, because in this kind of talking, I think one of the main challenges is to assume what are we saying. If we are saying really that happiness should be the ultimate goal of development, let's assume that with all its consequences. And that's where public policy designing and application have to do a lot of changes. Okay, but I think this is the main point. This is the main question that needs to be answered. Okay, but if happiness is a goal of development, we are talking a lot of how to implement it. Let me talk previously a little bit about why. And again, there's two ways of answering this question about why to do it. There's the instrumental one. It is important because through happiness, we can reach other important social goals. And there is evidence about that. And let me make a comparison about the debate. When we started to studying about happiness near 10 years ago, there is a lack of evidence, a very few evidence, strong evidence about connection between variables, between indicators. Now there is a very important work done. There is a lot of evidence. I invite you to read two important reports published recently in 2019, the World Happiness Report 2019, and the Global Council Happiness and Wellbeing Policy Report, published also in 2019. It's a very good, both of it are a very important piece of work with a lot of evidence. So you need now, so you have now the evidence that through increasing happiness, you can obtain, just examples, more learning skills in students, more productivity of firms, more health, positive health conditions, more civic engagement, and have electoral dividends. It's very interesting, but according to that evidence, people who is happier tend to vote more and tend to vote more for incumbents. Very interesting for a politician. And have you heard about in Mexico, the recent election of Andrés Manuel López Obrador, the new president? The results of happiness, they rise between the because of the election. Analysts say it's because of the election. So they're making connections. In my case, in Chile, I have many examples of mayors at the county level that have pushed in the agenda of happiness in the municipalities that have been re-elected many times. So again, as a strategy, you can tell to the actors, you can gain a lot of important things, important to you, if you go through the happiness strategy. That's the instrumental reasons. Of course, we have to discuss, again, the normative issues. Because I assume that many of you may share that it's not for instrumental reasons that happiness is an important goal for a society. Also for a normative point of view. Otherwise, and again, the same question, is it or is not the most important goal of life? Is it or is not the most important goal of a society? Let's assume the question and let's answer the question. And let me tell you that according to some evidence, those two questions, there's no consensus about the answer. I bet that in this room there is a lot of consensus, but as used to be, we have to think about the other people around the world that have no in our same consensus. There are a lot of people, I have evidence about that say happiness is important, but it's not the most important thing in life. There's another thing that are more important. They have a very sacrificial way of seeing their lives. And many actors, public actors, are willing to contest about if it is the most important goal for a society. No, there's another objectives. That we have to assume that the normative point of view is very not consensus. There's no consensus. We have to make a work about to provide not only evidence, but strong normative arguments in order to try to create a more broad consensus in order to push forward this agenda. So just keep in mind that there's a debate outside, not here, about how to answer these two questions. And the way we answer these two questions is all to do in order, if we move forward, in order to put into action this agenda. Because if we say no in the same question, in the two questions, we have nothing to do. Let's talk about anything else, human development, SDGs. But if we say yes to the two of these questions, that's the how comes as a task. So the question on the how, because many political actors say, okay, it's important, but it's impossible to put into action. No, we, again, as a collective, we say it can be done. And you have heard a lot of evidence that shows that it can be done. Okay? Just take into consideration that it cannot be done directly. What means directly, in our words? You cannot force people to be happy. You cannot oblige them to be happy. And we know that from the philosophers, but there are some plans to say, some people who say, but why don't give people pills to feel well? That's not the point in public policy. You cannot force people to be happy. You cannot try to do it directly, because you need to, instead of trying to go directly to people, you need to create a social environment through public policies, an environment that enables people to develop the capabilities that can make them to pursue at first place and reach happiness. And taking into consideration that happiness itself as a goal has a lot of problems, again, in order to the diversity of images about happiness that can be. So creating a social environment that enables people to develop the capabilities to be happy, we think is what public policy can do in order to put happiness in the center of the agenda. So in the next part of my presentation, I'm going to tell how we think this can be done in a more specific way. But if I have to make a map, this is just a map of the phases we think we have to go through in order to put this into practice. You have 6 steps, 6 challenges. First of all, I'm trying to put inside my time frame. You please let me know if I'm going too long. But first of all, we have to expand our approach about happiness. Again, happiness is a very tricky word. When we conduct some qualitative research, in discussion groups, there's one solid consensus. Let's agree, say the people, common people, let's agree that what makes me happy, maybe not make you happy. And if we respect that, we can still talking. So there are many different ways of understanding happiness. Otherwise, the word happiness in the public conversation inspire a lot of suspicious minds, because some people directly laugh when hear that word. Some people say, oh, you as a powerful person are using that word because you want to hide something from me. Okay? So another problem with the word. We say we have to move forward to another word that go in the same direction, but it's more useful for public policies. That's why we used to prefer to call about subjective well-being. Professor Graham yesterday told a lot about that, and about measurements, about how to define it. I will not say the same things in that point. But subjective well-being, I think, is more useful for public policies. But again, we are talking about near the same thing, but in a more useful way. If you change your way to understand happiness in a subjective well-being, you can raise another kind of questions. For instance, the complexity of subjectivity. And let me say something about this word, subjectivity. What is subjectivity? In our long, more than 23 years researching about human development at Chile, our work in Chile had to do a lot to put people's minds, what people think, over the table of the analyst. So that is subjectivity, how people in their everyday life understand what's going on with the country, what's going on with their life in the country, what are their hopes, their fears. I say that and you say yes, but in my country, many politicians, when we start to researching about subjectivity, they say us, don't worry what people think. That's really, I remember real experiences. Who cares about what people think? People don't understand even their own lives. And we prove that, on the contrary, it's so important to understand what people think, because it's a matter of normativity, it's the dignity of the person, but also because if you don't understand what people think, you have consequences. You operate as a public policy designer, and you get wrong, and you have the consequences if you don't understand the people. So that's why it's very important to understand that in order to increase development, subjectivity matters. We used to say subjectivity of people is a so hard variable as GDP. You have to understand both phenomena to understand what is going on with your society entirely. So that's why you have to adopt a comprehensive definition of subjective well-being. That means understand that subjective well-being is not something related with individual side of life, but also with society. And then next steps, working on that dynamic and focusing public action regarding the complexity of that dynamic. I'm going to go inside every of these 6 steps to continue my presentation. Let me show you this. When I say you have to understand subjective well-being in all its complexity, we put into the table that in order to understand subjective well-being, you have to understand not only what people think about their own lives, but also what people think about society within their lives. And the aspiration as a goal is that everyone has a very satisfactory evaluation about their own life, but also about the country, the community where they live. We have to work at both levels and understand both levels, because something weird happens if we don't do it. Let me show you this map. It's based on our research in Chile, but it's useful for me to show you why those two levels are important. In Chile, we have a very, for some people, very weird situation about subjective well-being. People in Chile have very high rates of life satisfaction, but also they have very low rates about trust in institutions. So they say in Chile, we are very content and happy with their own lives, but we are very critical with our society. How can it be possible? So are we happy or not? Because we are happier, but we are more and increasingly more critical with institutions, with power, with politicians, with big enterprises, with all kinds of actors that be near of power. How can it that possible? You have a map there that cross two dimensions. Subjective well-being with regard to society, and individual subjective well-being. And you can show, so you can see that there are different positions. So this kind of cross are part of the map of subjectivity. And you have to understand all the complexity. I'm not going inside any specific. I just trying to show the possibility of contradictory results. Because that, I think, we have an important warning about that. It's a little bit of my conclusion of what I heard yesterday. We still need a more deep understanding of people's subjectivity. We have made a lot of progress. We have more and more evidence, massive evidence. But I'm not sure if that evidence makes us more wise about what people is really thinking about their own lives. For me, this is a very important point nowadays. We don't understand. We have to start recognizing that we don't understand. And when I say we, I assume my position as a part of what we so-called an elite of our country, an elite of the global discussion. And because of our work, we say there is a very important divide between elites, all kinds of elites, and common people. And the most authentic thing we can say is we don't understand nothing. That kind of expression I heard about a very high dignity of the Catholic Church months ago, who he said, you know, the real point is we don't know what is going on. And I think it's a very honest starting point to say we have a lot of information, but we don't understand really what's going on. And why is it so important? Because from the point of view of an analyst, a professional, a policy designer, we maybe can see contradictory results and say what people is contradictory, what people do the wrong thing, do the wrong choices. But from the point of view of people in the common day, they may be perfect synchrony with do something we can think as an analyst that is wrong. So we as an analyst, as a technocrats, we used to think that people is wrong. I invite all of you to understand what we are wrong and why people do things that for our point of view appears to be strange for us. In my country, some people say how it can be possible that people go to demonstrate to the streets in the morning and go to buy at the malls and consume everything in the afternoon. That can be wrong. But what's the problem? For the people, it's completely perfect match to go and demonstrate, and after that, go and buy whatever. So that's a very important thing, because thinking about happiness and about public policy about happiness, we can make this mistake very often. So we need a more profound understanding of what happened with some people. And I think in a methodological point of view, it need to be done more qualitative, with more qualitative approach. Okay, but if we are going inside the task to translate or create a social environment that promotes happiness, subjective well-being, what we have to do, our proposition is going through a path of expanding capabilities. Capabilities, again, is a very large accumulation of academic work. All of what I'm saying comes from the work from people like Amartya Sen, Martha Nussbaum, and drawing from this kind of wisdom in order to explain what we propose. And we propose to expand capabilities of people. But what are capabilities? Capabilities, again, as this point of view, are the actual freedoms that people have to decide what they want and put into action that design. Key words for me here are freedom, but actual freedom. Sen have the distinction between formal freedom and real freedom. Well, actual freedom means not just the normative freedom, something right in a paper, a law to say you have the right to do something. It also means the condition, the social condition to put into practice that rights, for instance, in order to really can do what you want to do. And the opportunity of this approach is to put into attention that individual actions are collectively created as a possibility. And that's also a very important challenge in this kind of talking about happiness and development, that more often the discussion tends to divide, to separate individual level to collective level. Many of you know that at the happiness discussion, they say it's just a matter of choice, it just depends on you. No, at the end, depends on one, but you have to create social conditions to connect this individual decision to a collective level. And another word key for me is agency. It's the capacity to be an actor. And that's why this vision have in common with human development approach. What is the most key factor for me of human development approach is that this approach put attention onto the actor, to the subjectivity, to the subject, not only think about what people receive as a result of a development process, but also pay attention to how the persons are involved in creating the benefit they are receiving. So the actor point of view is very important. So agency, the capacity to be an actor of your life, individually and collectively, is very important in order to reach subjective well-being. It's totally the opposite, is just to receive conditions about you are nothing to do about how to create it, how to put it in practices. Our research shows that only putting in practice my agency capacity is a way in order to increase my subjective well-being. No matter if I reach my goal or not, but just feeling that I'm doing something in order to fulfill the kind of life I want to fulfill, that makes you happier. So that's so important, the word agency. But regarding public policies, it's very important that capabilities cannot be created just formally. Capabilities, or an environment to develop capabilities, need to take into account the real life of people. Again, that's why so important call about taking into account everyday people. Let me just scheme there. Let me say a little bit something about that. For instance, when you say we have to create a social environment, that everything. Okay, let's create opportunities. Very good. Thank you. But opportunities according to whom? According to the technique who is creating opportunities? according to what people in their life projects are thinking there is an opportunity. You got it? You change all the game if you put the perspective from the perspective of people. The same thing about how you can open the door for, in a fair way to many can reach those opportunity, and also the scenarios where those capacity, this new capacity will want to be deployed. I have the experience of in a municipality in Chile where the mayor, regarding this agenda of happiness, promote young people to form rock bands. So that's a very successful project. But they had the problem that when they start to play and make concerts, elder people of the country get angry with the youngs, so they cannot play. So why they create the bands if you don't want to have the scenario or the spaces, the public spaces to deploy this new capacity? That we have to take into account the scenarios. But again, everything in order to create capacities to be an agent of your life, individually and collectively. That's, in our research, conduct to better conditions to subjective well-being. But the challenges doesn't stop there. Because if we are saying create capabilities, okay, which one? Or for which one we can start? Another debate. This is a very long list of capabilities, going again from the work of many social scientists. We try to short down a list. But the point I want to make this, there's 11 capabilities, different kind of things, is which one you promote especially. And of course, the answer cannot be done strictly from a technical point of view. There's not a right technical answer about what of these 11 capabilities is most important. That's my point. It's not a right answer, because it depends on what people prefer. It depends of every cultural context, social context, and that's, again, why this agenda needs a lot of deliberation, a lot of public deliberation in order to legitimize those decisions. Those agenda is not about change one technocracy for another technocracy, the technocracy of macroeconomics for the technocracy of happiness. No, this agenda needs a lot of social legitimacy because they don't have it until now and need it to be profounded. In other contexts, with more time, I will ask you what of this you will put in the first place, and what of this you take it out of the list. If we do something like this, you're going to see, like in this group, we are all convinced about the importance of this agenda. We are not agreed about this list. And that's the importance, and that's the challenges. That we are agreed in the big decisions, but we are in the little decisions or in the specific decision to put into practice some things. The debate is wide open, and positions are very different. And again, the only way to reach a consensus, or not a consensus, but a collective decision, is through deliberation, through debate. And that's so important, why participation is so important in this debate. Just to tell you an evidence, when we put this list to be discussed for common people in Chile and ask them to put one dimension in the first place and take out one dimension of the list, the dimension that they put in the first place is health, enjoying good health. And the dimension that put in Chile out of the list is the dimension about participating and having an influence in society. Because people say, you never can do that. That you understand what it's totally the opposite to be a subject. It's to say, okay, this is Chilean case. I can be a very important subject of my own life. But society, no, only powerful people do that. That's the problem. That we have to cross the line to individual stage, to collective stage, because those social enable environment depends of engagement, you know? So we have a very important work to do in that place. I have to choose what to show you in the last part of my presentation. We did a statistical work using satisfaction with life as a dependent variable. Carrie from OECD is not here, but we discussed here yesterday with her about to have a dashboard of indicators instead of have one indicator leading as a dependent variable. Where we used the life satisfaction with life as a dependent indicator, and we regressioned all of this against those dependent variables in order to understand in people's mind what is more important for their satisfaction with their lives. And we found this, that is the bigger the wheel, the most correlated with satisfaction with life. And for me, it's important to show it because the following. If you see material dimensions are the most important correlated with satisfaction with life. What this is important for me? Because it says us from the evidence that the traditional agenda, having a job, having a house, is still there as a challenge. And it's important because when they say, oh, let's go for happiness agenda, some people hear, oh, you want to go there because you don't want to go to inequalities on income, to inequalities on jobs, to inequality, okay? No, in countries like Chile, the traditional agenda of development is still there as a very important demand and is highly correlated with life satisfaction. And this is important for many developing countries. Yesterday also, some people ask about what's happening with this kind of material in developing countries, not on developed countries, where the material dimension is so important also. But as there is a material dimension, life meaning, relational dimension are also very, very important. And regarding satisfaction with life and regarding satisfaction with society, dimensions also more subjective also are important. You can see acknowledgement dimension, respect, dignity, human security are very important. And let me say just a little bit about infrastructure. I know this expertise, but when you see about something about dignity, you can do a lot from the point of view of infrastructure, because you have a lot of situations where, because of the way the technical person evaluate projects, they take decisions that don't respect the dignity in the same way for every person. Highways that in some part of the city go in a tunnel, in other parts of the city go outside, putting those two communities aside. Or the kind of, the amount of parks, the amount of green areas, or the beauty of public buildings included is unequally distributed. And this affects dignity of people. I have a lot of examples in mind for time, I can tell you, but this dimension of infrastructure regarding to dignity, regarding to aesthetics, is so important in order to create those other dimensions about respect. Also, participation in designing, whatever you have to design about decisions of infrastructure or the design of the city is also related with respect. They don't even ask us about what they are building here. That's a very often complaint of people, and they affect the respect, the self-esteem, and of course the life satisfaction. Innovation in public policy, I think we have heard a lot in this day. There's a lot of need of innovation, but yeah, I just want to stress the point that innovation needs to be supported, and with a lot of supportive environment for the errors. We don't know, we just have to try many things and need to be supported. But I will not part of the measurement things. I just want to finish emphasizing the process that need to be mapped, taking into the account again the question or the thing about participation. This is too important because it's an agenda that needs to be built again, understanding in a profound way what people wanted, what people desire, not just to do everything what people desire or what people think, but to understand, if there is one, why they think or they desire something that I, as a technician, think is not good, and talk about these differences. So participation, political deliberation is so important. And the last one, this is an agenda that is still on building. We have a lot of progress from 10 years ago. I already said about a lot of more evidence, strong evidence. We have to talk about these things, but it's a conversation that needs to be going on. And there are some places where it's more likely to be installed, the local place, the local level where everyday life going more near to the people is a very good place to do it. But again, let's assume that outside this room there are a lot of problems for the plea of happiness as a political discourse, as an image of development, because of suspicions, because of someone think there's not relevant, because someone think you appeal to that agenda because you're trying to hide me from another more deeper problem. So there's still a problem of legitimacy. Okay. Recently, again, in Chile, the last World Development Happiness Report put us as the most happier country in Latin America. And the debate at the public sphere was absolutely saying they are wrong, it cannot be possible. You got it? So there's another an important work to do in order to create broader legitimacy of this agenda. For this, leadership is vital. Political leadership, you know, there's example about countries that put into practice some ministers, etc. High leadership, if we are talking about an organization, at the highest level of organization, leadership is a very important thing in order to make it to advance this agenda. I think I say that about political leadership, but what about academic leadership? What the role of universities to do in order to put this agenda not inside the campus, outside the campus. It's outside the campus where we have to go to dispute another narratives about the future and show how we can live with the other narratives, but be a leverage point for those narratives. Never forgetting, again, the most important, for me, question. What is the ultimate goal of our lives? What is the ultimate goal of a society? Answer that question and acting according to that answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think that presentation sort of puts on its head the whole concept of development that has taken place and taken shape over the last really 50, 60 years. It's quite profound, and we thank you very much for your ideas. So now we will open it up for questions. We can probably take about 3. So there's one right here.
Thank you, very interesting. And obviously Chile being one of the advanced developing countries, I have a comment and a question. First of all, what institution in Chile allowed you to do such a survey? So what was the setup? Was it academia? Was it a municipality? Because indeed, it can be very political and many countries may resist having such questionnaires being floated around in a community. But secondly, I thought perhaps for development, economists, development practitioners, and it would be probably again very costly, but to come up with measurements of the costs of not looking at these things and say, hey, if this is not done, health deteriorates, and the extra additional budget for health you have to put in outweighs the benefit of looking at well-being in a more comprehensive manner. But then we reached to your last slide, which in Chile you did the survey successfully, and it boils down back to the things that I've worked at the World Bank for 30 years. We've always thought, okay, well-being is the material side of things, and it's been supported by your survey. So in some sense, the danger could be that, hey, this is proving that the traditional development paradigms were the right ones. There's nothing additional, and given the limited resources, forget about developing new surveys, new indices, new measurement tools. If you're coming back to this in a country like Chile, which has done so much and has gone through so much advancement in every respect, institutionally, politically, governance, it's a forerunner for developing countries. So, a question and a comment.
Thank you. If I get you right, yes. What institution led us to do it? Well, United Nations. That's a very important thing because in a way, the presence of United Nations in these kind of themes, you want it or not, they give us an authoritative argument. Sometimes at the Human Development Reports, we are not saying something really new, but we say, or we operate as a space to say something that other actors say, oh, look, United Nations are saying this. So that's so important. That way we draw upon the work of many, many other people, colleagues, academics, and professionals in order maybe to give the lights to those kinds of things. We're not part of agency. No, we're not part of the government. We're independent from government. That's the important things. Because again, you're right, you need to be independent to be credible. As I told you, as you also say things that can be debatable, and people have a lack of trust in any institutions, you have to draw upon your credibility created because of a long work of good work done and good credibility to say, I'm saying things that are technically right, that are created also in a broad conversation with persons from every different kind of background, different kind of political positions. But I take from your comment the necessity of a position where those kind of data have the reputation, the sufficient reputation to not be disputed at the technical point and just dispute the point, the data I'm saying, okay? And the lack of trust in countries like Chile, but many others, is so deep that maybe sometimes you have problems not only telling bad news to the people, but also telling good news to the country. So the capacity to say things and be credible is you have to work a lot of that trace and don't lose it in any way. That's why statistics and everything is a matter of trust, fundamentally a matter of trust. And I think your second comment is what's add this kind of evidence. Well, that's the importance of having the possibility to break down the data in different kind of groups. I don't have the time to show you, but okay, when they say, oh, the material dimension is still important, okay, we are saying something very important. I'm not trying to talk about happiness in order to hide something else. No, we still have a problem about poverty. We still have a problem about inequality of income. We have to deal with that problem. We are adding a new perspective that is useful to deal with also those kind of problems. That's why I show you at the first part of my presentation the evidence that show that the happier the person, the more the learning in the academic sphere, the more productivity at firms. Again, if you don't get it for the normative argument, at least take my instrumental argument in order to show something. And again, it's very useful and for showing something else, something different, when you break the data for some social groups, equalizing some characteristics. So inside some group of income, what are the differences? And the difference appear. Or for instance, inside age groups, the difference appear. I also wanted to think about, show you some data, but there's a lot of data yesterday. And for instance, if you control everything inside the childhood, the childhood, yes, you can identify that women in Chile from 13 to 16 years are less happier than all their peers. What's going on there? So that's what it adds, the possibility to control the other things in order to find out gaps on these log indicators and try to understand why are the gaps. Okay?
Yes, I have a question about your slide with subjective evaluation of oneself and then of the society out there. I'm a bit perplexed by that, because I think that it's the subjective well-being of the person himself in the context of society. His well-being, of course, is affected by the context in which he lives, and the environment, the social institution, and the infrastructure, and so on, everything. But it is the evaluation of his own well-being that we are interested in. And we understand that it is conditioned by the context, but it is not a separate evaluation of the context and then a separate evaluation of the person's life itself. I would wonder whether you would agree with my assessment of that.
If I get it the right way, the contradiction of the two levels of evaluation, it's a very important thing, and for us it's a matter of study to try to understand. I draw in a line. We have two lines like this. If you add the two indicators at the time in the long haul, satisfaction with own lives goes like this, up, and satisfaction with institution go absolutely in the opposite way. And what is useful, again, what is useful to understand this gap is useful because you, as a politician, as a policymaker, you have to understand that it's not just people evaluate their life and that's all the goal you have to do. People can be more critical for institutions because of for instance, what is the cost, at what cost they are fulfilling their desires of their own life. In Chile, again, also in Chile, people say, okay, my life is improving. I live better than my parents, but at what cost? At a very high cost in terms of insecurity, in terms of loneliness, in terms of lack of social relations, and that cost in terms of have to accept a lot of abuse from power, abuse regarding everyday interaction, abuse with the big enterprise, the health system, the company that make you a charge that they don't have to do it in your telephone. The abuse experience is an everyday experience in Chilean society. And they say, okay, I can manage to go with my goals in that context, but I need to be like a hero in order to do that. And I'm going to do that because I am a hero, but a lonely one. I wanted to have more support from institutions, more security from a healthcare system, more security from a pension system, more security from an employment system, more be accompanied by the society. What Chileans want is collective support for their individual projects. That's the point. And you don't reach that point, you don't understand that point, only tracking the individual level of evaluation. If you track the other level of evaluation, you can reach with the contradiction and try to understand what is not a contradiction. And again, from a political point of view, it's absolutely necessary to understand that contradiction. Because happens that you, as a politician, think you understand your constituency and thinks your constituency is following you, and you realize that they're not following you, you don't understand, and there's another group that connected better, understood better, and got voted, for instance.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marquez.
Thank you.
Profound
Yeah.
presentation.
Can I do some last thing?
Absolutely.
Just say thank you to your invitation, and I promise to show this, because I have an inspiration when they invite me, the Bahá'í Chair invite me, I have the inspiration to come here and go and visit the temple. This is a temple of Bahá'í community that is in Chile, that is in Santiago de Chile, and it's amazing, a beautiful temple, not just as a building, it's an amazing building, but just a space where you can go and reflect. And part of the honor to be invited here is to get me into that connection, and thank you for this invitation.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. There is so much to think about after that presentation. So we will now break for lunch for an hour, returning at 2:45 sharp, and invite everyone to go and enjoy lunch at the side of the room. Okay? Thank you. So I would ask that you move quickly through the lines so that you have ample time to relax and eat and come back in an hour. Thank you.